She was only 4 years old the first time she stood in front of a camera, and by the time most children were still learning to read, she was already one of the most recognized faces in America. She never really had a childhood the way most kids do.
There was no choosing whether she wanted to act.
Her mother had already decided that for her, long before she was old enough to have an opinion of her own. By the time she became an adult, she had already lived through more fame, more pressure, and more heartbreak than most people experience in an entire lifetime. And her story would end in a way that still leaves people asking questions decades later. So, what was life really like behind the scenes for one of Hollywood's most famous faces? Let us find out. Natalie Wood was born in 1938 to Russian immigrant parents living in California. From an incredibly young age, her mother pushed her toward acting, believing her daughter was destined for stardom. By 4 years old, she had already appeared in her first film. Unlike many child actors who stumbled into fame by accident, Natalie's path was carefully planned by her mother from the very beginning. There were no school plays, no casual auditions. Every step was deliberate, every opportunity chased down with intense focus. By the time she reached her teenage years, she was already a major star, known for her role in a Christmas film that remains popular even now. She worked constantly, moving from one film set to another, rarely given the chance to simply be a normal kid. She has been quoted saying that her mother often told her acting was the most important thing in her life, more important than friendships, more important than simply being a child. Whether she wanted that pressure or not, it became the entire structure of her early life, whether she was ready for it or not. As she grew older, Natalie Wood's career only grew bigger. She starred in major films throughout her teenage years and into her 20s, working alongside some of the most respected actors of her generation. Her performances earned her serious recognition, including multiple nominations for major acting awards. She became known for choosing complicated, emotionally difficult roles rather than simple, glamorous ones. Directors respected her seriousness about the craft, even though the public often focused more on her personal life than her actual work. And there was plenty of personal life to focus on. She married actor Robert Wagner when she was still very young, and their relationship became one of the most talked about in Hollywood. The couple later divorced, though they would eventually remarry each other years afterward, a decision that surprised many people who assumed their story had already ended. Throughout it all, Natalie kept working, taking on serious dramatic roles that showed a different side of her than the sweet, innocent image many people had formed of her as a child star. She wanted to be respected as a real actress, not simply remembered as the little girl from her early films. Despite everything she achieved, Natalie Wood's life was far from easy. Friends and colleagues who knew her described someone who struggled privately with anxiety, particularly a deep fear of dark water that stayed with her throughout her entire life. She rarely discussed where that fear came from, though those close to her believed it stemmed from something frightening that happened during her childhood, possibly connected to an accident on one of her early film sets. Whatever the cause, it followed her for the rest of her life, something she reportedly never fully overcame. She also faced the constant pressure of being a woman in an industry that often valued youth and image over actual talent. As she grew older, she had to fight harder for meaningful roles, something many actresses of her generation experienced as Hollywood's attention shifted toward younger performers. Despite these struggles, she remained one of the most respected actresses of her time, someone whose talent was never seriously questioned, even by people who focused mostly on her personal life instead of her work. In 1981, Natalie Wood's life came to a sudden and tragic end. She drowned near a boat off the coast of California, during what should have been a simple weekend trip with her husband and a close friend. She was only 43 years old. The exact details of what happened that night have remained unclear for decades, leading to endless questions, investigations, and public speculation that continue even now. Her deep fear of dark water made the circumstances of her death feel even more painful and confusing to those who knew her best. Her passing shocked the entire industry, cutting short a career that was still very much alive and evolving. She left behind children, a husband, and a body of work that continues to be studied and appreciated by new generations of film fans. So, what was Natalie Wood's life really like? It was a life shaped almost entirely by other people's decisions from the very beginning, built on undeniable talent, but shadowed constantly by personal fear and public pressure. She never fully got to choose her own path, and her story ended before she ever got the chance to fully define it on her own terms. That is the real story behind Natalie Wood's lifestyle, a woman whose talent never faded, even though her story ended far too soon. If you enjoyed this story, let me know in the comments who you would like me to cover next.